everyone, I'm Emerald Mosaic, and today I'm going to do something I've been putting off for a bit. I've been wanting to tell stories about my late wife, and I've been kind of putting it off because in order to talk about her, I have to talk about a subject that is rather challenging in today's culture. And that's because my wife was a trans woman. She was transgender. So from the get-go, this is going to be challenging because I know there are so many people who are disbelieving that trans is real, who have ideas about the motives of trans people, and some of these people are members of my own family, and so this is going to be difficult because I'm going to be directly confronting a lot of those attitudes and those beliefs. But my wife was the absolute best thing that ever happened to me, and I believe her story desperately needs to be told. So I had been making notes for a book, and I have not been writing it. So I think this is probably going to be a better way to do this. So starting out, I want to explain a little bit about what transgender is. And in order to do that, first I need to give a little bit of a definition of it. So, and the first part of that is to define the difference between sex and gender. So sex is your body, your physical characteristics, the genitalia that you have, and then gender is what you feel in the inside, on like who you are in your mind. And sometimes these don't match, and that's where the challenge is for these people, for transgender people, and also even people like myself who are non-binary. I present as feminine. I am okay with she, her pronouns, but in my core, in my inside, I'm non-binary, and that's for a different reason that I'll get into later. So for my wife, she was born into a male body. She had male genitalia. She was raised with he, him pronouns, and she was raised in the, she was raised in Utah, just outside of Salt Lake City. And so, yes, she was raised in the Latter-day Saints church. So, quick side note, Mormon and Latter-day Saints used to be the same thing. They split. The Mormons are the polygamous ones. The Latter-day Saints are not. That's pretty much the only difference these days. There might be others, but I'm not an expert on that. It was not my faith. It was not what I grew up with. I learned a whole lot about it from Natalie. Before I met Natalie, I was one of those Christians who truly believed the narrative that trans people were going against God's will. Quick note, I'm talking about religion and I'm talking about my experience. I will shut down any comments that try to convince me that Christianity is the way to go, because I do have PTSD related to this. I can handle talking about it when I'm the one talking because it's safe, because I know my limits. When other people try to talk to me about it, I don't, if I don't know that they recognize and acknowledge my PTSD, I will shut that conversation down because I'm not safe. So just so you know, in my past, I did believe in Christianity, and in my past, before the trauma happened, well, I should say before I had acknowledged some of the trauma and before the worst of the trauma happened, I truly believed that trans people were going against the will of God, and by doing things to their body that were not natural. I had one single experience with a trans person that was online. I had never seen this person in person. I didn't know them from Adam or Eve. I didn't know anything about that person. And when I found out that they were trans, I quoted the narrative at them. And I'm actually pretty ashamed of that because that was harmful. And I don't want to be a person who does harmful things. And if that person is listening, I just want to say I'm sorry. I didn't know better, and I know better now. And I'm so sorry I did that to you. So I went to a group activity. This was in September 6th, actually, of 2017. I had just moved to a new town. I'm not going to go into the reasons for that right now. That's a whole different story. I just moved there. I was trying to get to know people, so I joined a social group that had monthly meetings, sometimes more often, but usually monthly. And this was my second time to go to a group meeting. And it was a college town in Texas, and so September 6th, all of the kids had come back to college. You know, the town just all of a sudden filled up, as a college town does. And so at this meeting, there was so many more people there than had been there the month before. And that was really exciting because, now I'm getting to meet people, right? And as people were coming in, we met at this little, it was like a bar, and then it had this courtyard that was not even paved. It was just dirt, and there were tables. There was a couch there. Like, it was kind of weird. It was the fun kind of weird, you know? And so I think I had just gotten something to drink inside, and then I went outside because that's where the fun was going to be. That's where we were all gathering. I'm sure there were non-group members who went there that evening who were like, what's all this people here? What are we doing? And so anyway, as people were coming in, and we were having great conversations, and I was sitting on the couch, and there was a table in front of it, and then to my left there was a smaller round table with more chairs around it, and people were starting to come up and mingle, and I could overhear conversations. I was not actually in the middle of any conversations right then, so I was just kind of letting it wash over me, just kind of enjoying the energy of it. And I noticed this one person that, to me, looked like a guy in a skirt. And I was like, that's interesting. That's curious. That's different. I wonder if this person might be trans or just a cross-dresser. Like, I don't know. And at that point, because I didn't know this person, I was thinking he, him. That was just, the way I was raised. If a person looks masculine, you call them he. That's just what I grew up with. And so as I was listening to the conversation, this person at one point mentioned that they were that they had Asperger's. Now, back then, a lot of people, and still there are some today, who are on the autism spectrum who were diagnosed, and I was originally diagnosed with Asperger's as opposed to autism. Now they have been, since then in the DSM, they have been combined to the autism spectrum disorder. So the Asperger's was the quote unquote higher functioning. By the way, there's a reason why that is not helpful to think of it that way, because that determines whether a person is quote unquote useful to society. That is a very capitalist idea. It is very demeaning to the people who are labeled as not useful. And by the way, any of us autistic people can at any moment become so overwhelmed and burned out that we become not useful. That's damaging, a totally damaging narrative. So anyway, this person said that they were that they had Asperger's. And so we often, a lot of us with Asperger's, who were diagnosed with Asperger's, would shorten it to, I'm an Aspie, right? So I yelled over, Aspies unite! And I put my hand up for a high five, and that person met me. Woo! That was like awesome moment. So this person came over to talk to me and introduced themselves as Natalie. And I was like, okay. So I had to kind of rearrange things in my head there for a second. Okay, this person is trans. This person is presenting themselves or trying to present as female. Now at the time, her hair was still very short. She had just barely started growing it out. Like it hadn't been all that long since her last haircut, and she was determined this time to let her hair grow out to present as more female. As I got to know her that day, like we sat next to each other and we're just talking, and we found that we had so much in common. We had actually been in the same town in Texas where I lived for just a few years. She was 11 years younger than me. So when I was, 17, 18, she was, 18 minus 11 math. She was under 10 years old, so she was just a kid and looked like a little boy at that time. And she was there visiting family for an entire summer with her parents and sister. And, but she was at that time a little boy, and it was a tourist town. So there was always people coming through. But just the whole fact that we had been in the same town at the same time and never, like if we ever did cross paths, it never registered, we had very similar experiences. My family had done mission work in Mexico when I was a teenager, since she was part of Latter-day Saints, and back when she was 18 years old, she was still identifying and presenting as male. She had never even heard of trans before at that point. So she still thought that she was male, and she had to go on mission. This is something that Latter-day Saints young men have to do. They are required by their church to go on mission. And she had gone to Mexico. And there was just so many commonalities. A lot of the trauma that we had experienced was similar, just so much. And I was like, I need to get to know this person. And so that day, so I knew that she had told me her online username, and I couldn't remember it then afterwards, because I wanted to look her up and chat online with her and get to know her better. I was like, I just knew that this is a person I needed to get to know. I didn't know exactly why. I didn't know what was going to come of it. I was thinking, close friend, or I didn't know. But I was like, this is a person I need to get to know. I just knew that. So, that evening, I went home and I started looking through the online group's list of members. And because, again, college town, there was hundreds of members. I was scrolling through the usernames in alphabetical order, and it wasn't until I got to the I's that I finally found her username and remembered what it was. And her username was, I do not have a dino. What? I do not have a dino. I asked her why. She's like, because I don't have one. It's like, but why a dino? Why are you focused on a dino? It was something to throw people off. That was literally it. Turns out she had the autism. She had ADHD like me. And she had the trauma like me. Like, there was, again, so much in common. And I just adored her style. The fact that she was engaged and funny and loved to make people laugh, and just all around, you could just sense that she was a safe person to be around. She was never going to intentionally harm you. If she harmed you, it would be totally by accident. I've had people say that about me, and that's how I try to be. I do not try to intentionally hurt people. If I do, it's usually by accident, or I'm just trying to protect myself. And if I cause other people pain because I'm trying to protect myself, I'm sorry, but I have to protect myself. I just have to. Sorry, not sorry. So anyway, we started talking online at first, kind of waiting until the next meeting. We got to know each other a bit. And then at the following meeting, just talking with her again and just feeling that connection that I need to get to know this person. One of the things that she talked about was how she was currently staying with her cousin, who, by the way, was trans male. So born female and transitioning to male. So this is interesting. She had that cousin who, by the way, was married to a trans woman. They both transitioned while they were married. So that's kind of interesting. They flipped genders. They were each born to one sex, and they just each became the opposite. So they were still male and female, just different ones. And then also one of their children was transitioning. She had another cousin who was transitioning from female to male. Apparently, there might be a genetic component to the transgender. I don't know. I do know that people who are on the autism spectrum are far more likely to be LGBTQIA, whether that's referring to their sexuality, which is who they're attracted to, or their gender, which is who they identify as. So people on the autism spectrum are far more likely to be queer, to put it under a broad umbrella term. So, so that was just fascinating. So she was living with her cousin, and one of the complaints that she had was that her cousin would not let her do any of the housework. And she's like, I just want to contribute. I don't want to mooch. I want to help out. I don't want anybody to accuse me of taking advantage of them. So I want to contribute, and they won't let me. And I was like, well, if you want to clean a house, I could use a little help. And she's like, I mean, I'd be willing. If you pay me, I'd be willing to help you out. And I was like, okay, so I was like, I walked over here. Let me show you my apartment. So we walked the several blocks back to my apartment because, again, this was a person that you intuitively know you can trust. I even checked later. I contacted her therapist. Is there any reason why I shouldn't trust her? Her therapist was like, no, you can trust this person completely. So it's like, okay, I got her therapist okay on that. It wasn't just my intuition. It was somebody else also confirming, yeah, she's trustworthy. And just so you know, Natalie never betrayed my trust. Not once, ever. She was completely trustworthy. A totally rare person there. So anyway, she came back to my apartment, and nothing sexual happened at all. This was just, I was just seeing her as a friend at this point, literally just as a friend. This was just, I want to get to know this person. I know I can trust this person. If there's any way that she can help me with my home, that would be great, because I was struggling. I was working full-time as a nurse. I had a client one of the clients I ended up working with during that time, I was working an 8-hour shift and driving 45 minutes each way. And it was an emotionally stressful environment. So I needed help, because once I got home, I didn't want to do anything. So I was also, I didn't realize it at that moment, but I was starting to crash. I was starting to burn out, both as a nurse and just as an autistic person masking all the time. I was really starting to burn out. So just to kind of wrap up the part about trans, as I got to know her, and then as I later started dating her, which I'll go more into later, as I started to really see who she was as a person, I started to realize that she was more feminine than I was, without trying. She just was naturally, her brain worked like a woman in most ways. There was a few, everybody has a masculine side and a feminine side. And some people don't want to hear this, but it is true. Everybody has a masculine side and a feminine side. Her feminine side was far greater than her masculine side and had been ever since she was a child. I got to know a lot of her stories, the ways that she grew up, a lot of the traumatic experiences. I didn't think about it until just now, but I actually have a paper that she wrote, and she did this for the purpose of transitioning. She made a list of all of the experiences in her life that basically revealed the conflict between her sex and her gender identity. Things that she didn't even realize because she had never heard of trans until she was in her 20s, early 20s. And then all of a sudden she's like, wait, trans is a thing? She had never heard of it. It had never, ever crossed her radar. And the moment she heard about it, she's like, that's me. That's who I am. No wonder I feel so horrible. Just to give a small example, she had tried to castrate herself. She literally tried to castrate herself. And she ended up with a horrible infection and ended up sterile because of it, which she was perfectly okay with because she didn't want to have kids. But literally, she hated her genitalia to the point that she tried to remove them. If that doesn't tell you something about the distress that she was in, how much she hated her body, how much she hated being locked into this male box that she did not belong in. The pain in her soul from being stuck in a gender norm that didn't fit who she was. She was traumatized by this. Until she transitioned, she did not find any peace at all. Once she started on hormones and actually went to court, she had already had, I think, 2 different counselors write letters stating that she was in a much, she was in a sane frame of mind, meaning that this was not just a delusion, enough to transition, and that she was in psychological distress because she was being locked into a male gender that she didn't belong in, and that transitioning would improve her mental health. This had already been determined by 2 different, one of them I know was a counselor. I think the other was a psychologist. I could double check the letters. I have the letters. And then she went to court and defended to a judge her desire to transition and to change her legal gender. So on her driver's license, yes, it says sex. She was planning to change her sex. She was planning to have surgeries to change her actual sex characteristics. She never got there because she passed away, which I'll just talk more about later. But if a person is in that much distress, why not let them ease their distress? Why not give them the tools that they need to feel like they can express their true self in the world? I don't understand why there are people who are determined to say, no, you can't be you. And the fact that a lot of these people are Christians, I feel a whole lot of anger when I hear people say, no, God says you cannot be who you are. If a person is not harming anybody else, if a person is actually harming themselves because they're in such distress, who are you to say that a person cannot be themselves? it's damaging to do that. And if you are a religious person who claims to believe in love, who claims to believe in a deity that says that this deity is love, how dare you spew such hate? Okay, I'm going to move on from that because I get overwhelmed and distressed, and I think I've made my point. So I want to talk a little bit about the fears that she had as a trans person. And it's because of all of the hate that people have spewed. Natalie was absolutely terrified of going into a women's restroom, even when she was dressing as a woman, when she had grown out her hair and looked female, because her face still looked more masculine. She still had the brow ridge. She still had the strong jawline. She still had a more masculine face. She also didn't have breast implants. She also still had male genitalia, and in certain clothing that was potentially visible if people were looking, which they shouldn't be. I mean, I know we all have a tendency to glance at people's genitalia, but you better not be staring, because that's just not appropriate. Anyway, she was absolutely terrified of being caught, especially because we were in Texas at the time. And as you might be aware, Texas is a red state. It's very Republican. It is full of diehard conservatives. It is also part of the Southern Bible Belt of the United States. And there are a lot of fundamentalist Christians there who do not have an ounce of compassion in their hearts, even though they say that they are Christians. They don't have compassion on people. They don't have kindness for people. They don't have grace for people. And if you're a Christian and you're aware of the fruits of the Spirit, these are people who did not display them, in short. When we became homeless, she was terrified of going to a women's shelter, a DV shelter, domestic violence shelter. She was actually, she thought that she was being stalked by her family. I can neither confirm nor deny. I know that her fears were very real, and she was absolutely terrified that her family was going to come find her and kidnap her and take her home to be their slave again. Because as she was growing up, she essentially was their slave. By the way, that didn't just come from her. I have heard that from her Texas side of the family. The Utah side of the family was extremely narcissistic. I saw a photo of her dad and instantly just like total revulsion and like, get that away from me. That is a dangerous person. Just, that was my gut reaction to just a photo of him. Soulless eyes. Her mom was able to put on a better face for a photo, but knowing that she was married to a person with soulless eyes, I wanted nothing to do with her either. So she was absolutely terrified that her family was stalking her, and thus she went to domestic violence shelters when we were homeless. And as her wife, I went with her, especially when it got to a point where one of her cousin's husband made threats against the both of us. And at that point, I was in danger too. I'll go more into that later. But she was terrified of being caught, not just by her family, but she was terrified of being outed as a trans woman. The rhetoric in a lot of the conservative states, rhetoric among Republicans around trans people, is that trans women are, this is what they say. They said that trans women are men who want to go into women's restrooms to get a peek, who want to go into women's dressing rooms to get a peek. That they are pedophiles who want to see little girls. They're painting every single trans person with the same brush. Have you ever heard the term, don't judge a book by its cover? Again, I feel very angry at this narrative because it's not even giving people a chance to be seen for who they really are. And remember I said at the beginning how Natalie was one of those safe people? One of those people who wouldn't hurt a fly? She was the last person who would try to catch a peek. She never did that with me. She never did that with anybody else. She might point to a woman on the street and point out how attractive she was. I've done that. I've pointed out girls to my guy friends. Even before I realized that I was into women. Natalie was terrified. She was not an aggressor. She was afraid of being a victim. And for good reason. Trans people have been victims. Trans people have been beaten to death. Trans people have been marginalized. Trans people have been vilified. For what? For what? They've not done these things that they are accused of. Maybe one or two. Maybe. Out of the thousands of trans people throughout all history, by the way, throughout history. And yet she was absolutely terrified. She was afraid of being lynched in Texas. She had no idea how she would survive if she was ever put into prison and they forced her into a male prison. You know what they do to sissies in male prisons, right? This is hard for me to talk about. All I wanted to do was protect her. Keep her safe. Let her know that there was somebody in the world who was not going to judge her. Somebody in the world who was going to value her and all of her contributions. Somebody who saw her for who she really was. A very gentle, kind, and troubled woman. A woman. Not a man pretending. She was a woman. Okay, it's time to leave that section behind as well. And on a slightly more lighthearted part, and just highlight one of the oddities about being trans that's kind of funny, actually. So, a lot of people are aware that when women get sick, unless we're really sick, we just kind of, generally speaking, there's always exceptions, but generally speaking, women, when we get sick, we just kind of soldier on. When men get sick, they're known for being wusses. Okay, I'm putting that in air quotes because they're not. They actually feel the illness, even just a head cold. They feel it worse than women do. So this was a very fascinating thing that Natalie and her cousin both experienced. Natalie, back before she transitioned, before she started on estrogen, when she would get a cold, she felt like she was dying. Like, she felt so horribly sick. She just like laid in bed and can't do anything, and oh, I'm gonna die. Like, that's how she felt. When she started taking estrogen, the next time she got a cold, she was like, that's not so bad. I can still do stuff. Wash my hands so I don't get other people sick, but I can handle this. Her cousin transitioned from female to male. As a female, her cousin was like, a cold is no big deal. Started taking testosterone. Got sick. And he felt like he was dying. So, just so you know, when men say that they feel like they're dying when they get sick, they really do feel that way. And when women say it's no big deal, they really do feel that way. It's really not as big a deal for a woman to get sick as it is for a man. So just a very interesting, and that just simply has to do with hormones. Who knew? Another oddity is around feeling cold. Men are notoriously fine with being cold, and women can't stand it. Women are always cold. You know, that's the words. That's the stereotype. There we go. And so when Natalie transitioned to female, she was cold all the time. Now, a little bit had to do with shaving her legs, just a little bit. But she was always cold. She could not get warm, except unless it was like summer and she was outside in the heat. But the rest, and then she was like, oh, finally, I'm warm. And then she'd go inside into the air conditioning. Oh, it's so cold in here. And then her cousin had gone from always cold to taking testosterone, and now just was like, oh, it's so damn hot in here. Oh my God, I'm dying. You know, it's too hot. So very, very curious how, again, that's just simply hormonal, which also might explain with women who are going through perimenopause or menopause and start having the hot flashes. It's because our estrogen is going down. The lack of estrogen is making us a little bit more like the male body, and all of a sudden we are too hot and want the cold again. So just a little bit of lighthearted something there. It's hormonal. That's all it is. It's just hormonal. It's a natural process just because of hormones. So I made it through the video. That was a hard one. There's a lot of emotion packed into that one. I hope that this has given you a little bit of a glimpse into what it's actually like for a transgender person. And I hope you can start to see why my views around trans people changed so dramatically. I am now a friend of transgender people. I'm a friend of queer people. I actually considered for a little while whether I might be trans because of my masculine side. I decided no, I'm not. I have a little bit more of a masculine side than most women. I think that's largely due to the autism. I could be wrong. I'm not the expert on this. But I do know that despite having a very strong masculine side, my feminine side is stronger. So I have decided to just continue presenting as femme. So I call myself non-binary femme. It took a while to settle on that. It took a lot of introspection and kind of trying things on for size. And if they didn't fit, I rejected them. And so I've settled on non-binary femme. I do not fit into the stereotypical feminine type. Neither do I fit into the masculine. but I'm not squarely in the middle either. This is a spectrum. Gender is a spectrum. If this is the middle, I'm a little bit on the feminine side. Just a little bit. So there you have it. I hope you've learned something. I hope that if you're one of those people who believed a lot of the rhetoric about trans people, I hope some of this has changed your mind. If you're one of those Christians, I hope that you start to have some more compassion in your heart for trans people. I hope this video makes the world just a little bit of a better place. So I'll leave you with that. And for those of you that it's still the weekend, I hope you have a good one. Regardless of what day it is, I hope you have a good one. See y'all next time.